Hello, and welcome to another lesson taken from the book of Ecclesiastes. We are moving into the beginning phases of our study in the book of Ecclesiastes using Mike Willis's workbook dealing with that particular topic. If you are in need of one of those workbooks, if you would please contact us and let us know, I'll be happy to send you one. Today we're moving into lesson 2 in this series, which I believe is a very timely topic for the day and time in which we live. We're going to be looking at the conclusions that Solomon drew from his quest for happiness. There are many individuals who live their whole lives seeking happiness in one form or another and experiment with some of the very wrong things. There are some who will try to find happiness in drugs and alcohol. There are others who become compulsive recreationists. There's always going to be another camping trip. There's always going to be another fishing trip, hunting trip. And all of those things are wonderful in their proper context. But sometimes people become kind of obsessed with those things, and service unto God is left lacking. Time when we could worship God, we spend somewhere else. When we could be involved in activities that are spiritually uplifting, we're off chasing some other rainbow. So we want to look at the observations that Solomon made as he experimented with many of the common avenues that men will choose to follow as they strive to find happiness. The core of our lesson today picks up with the latter part of Ecclesiastes chapter 1 in verses 12 through 18, and then picks up in a section out of chapter 2 in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, beginning in verse 12 and going down through verse 17. We'll begin there as we start looking at the first item that Solomon examines. And this is the idea of the quest for knowledge. You know, it's wonderful to be intelligent. It's wonderful to be well read. It is wonderful to be in pursuit of knowledge that can be applied in practical ways. But sometimes individuals become obsessed with that. They want to have as many degrees behind their name as they can possibly accumulate. They are, for all intents and purposes, a professional student. There's always another class to take. There's always some other way for self-improvement. And while those may have their place, often individuals find that that's just a stepping stone to the next thing I need to go do. And they will spend their entire life in the quest for more and more and more education, but then fail to use a whole lot of that which they have learned. Let's notice what Solomon says about this in Ecclesiastes chapter 1, beginning in verse 12. I, the preacher, was king over Israel and Jerusalem, and I gave my heart to seek and search out by wisdom concerning all things that are done under the sun. This sore travail hath God given to the sons of man, to be exercised therewith. And I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and behold, all are vanity and vexation of spirit. That which is crooked cannot be made straight, and that which is wanting cannot be numbered. I commune with mine heart also, saying, Lo, I am come to great estate, and I've gotten more wisdom than all they that have been before me in Jerusalem. Yea, my heart has exercised experience of wisdom and knowledge. And I gave my heart to know wisdom, and to know madness and folly. I perceive that this also is vexation of spirit. For in much wisdom is much grief, and he that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow. Now, in question 1, the author asks, how was Solomon uniquely qualified to speak on the vanity of wisdom, the obsession with seeking after knowledge to the exclusion of the other affairs in life? Well, here in verse 14, he says, I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and vexation of spirit. Solomon's been around. By the time he's writing this, he said, I've had a chance to make some in-depth observations of the things that men pursue in this life, the great works that they have built, the things that are done under the sun. In fact, he goes on to say that he was divinely blessed with wisdom. He says here in verses 16 and 17, he said, "Lo, I am come to great estate, and have gotten more wisdom than all of they that have been before me in Jerusalem. Yea, my heart had great experience of wisdom and knowledge, and I gave my heart to know wisdom, and to know madness and folly." So God, as we had noticed last week, had given Solomon tremendous wisdom, for that's what he'd asked for. God had given him the opportunity to make a request as to what he wanted, and Solomon said, "I want the wisdom to be able to rule your people well." And God was pleased with that request, blessed him with wisdom, and also gave him riches and many other blessings besides. So Solomon was in a uniquely qualified position to say, let's just look at life and analyze it for a moment and see what we see. In question 2, what limits are placed on what man can accomplish through his own wisdom? There are some things that we can study about, but there are things that we can do nothing about. There's a certain futility in all the wisdom and knowledge that we accumulate. It simply helps us to see how helpless we are in some situations. As he says here in verse 15, that which is crooked cannot be made straight, and that which is wanting cannot be numbered. There are some things that men just cannot fix. There are some things that man cannot change. Man is not going to be able to do away with all of the suffering and all of the injustice that happens in this world. Those things come as a result of sin, and man is not able to eliminate sin from the human condition. So there will always be degrees of suffering and want. There will be instances of injustice that man will always have to endure. Even with all of our wisdom, we've not been able to stop disease and death. We know a lot more about those areas than what we knew in years past. Medical advancements have been a wonderful blessing, but people still get sick and people still die. Our wisdom and our knowledge is not going to eradicate that from the face of the earth. And think of all the natural disasters, the hurricanes that come ashore, the tornadoes that are spawned from one place to another, the flooding, the earthquakes that occur. We may have tremendous knowledge about the sets of circumstances which allow these things to happen. We can forecast where a hurricane may come inland. We may be able to give some degree of advance warning about the coming of a tornado, but we can't stop it. We can't change it. All we can do is apply our knowledge and say, well, here's what we know about this. Wisdom and knowledge are not going to be able to fix everything. And as Solomon uses the expression here, the crooked cannot be made straight. There are some things that our wisdom and knowledge will not be able to help us to conquer. In question 3, he said, what are some advantages of wisdom over foolishness? That's what he looked about here in verse 17. I gave my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. What he discovered was that there are two pathways that men can choose. The intelligent path of seeking after knowledge and wisdom to make the kind of choices that are going to help us draw closer to God and can give us an abundant life here in the practice of godliness and goodness toward our fellow man. But then there are those individuals who are deafened to all of that. They see that the gaining of knowledge and wisdom is foolishness. They want to live on the emotional side of life, be free to do what they want to do, regardless of the consequences. And so Solomon looks at these two avenues that men can choose to walk. And notice what he finds in chapter 2 and verse 13. He said, Then I saw that wisdom excelleth folly, as far as light excelleth darkness. Wisdom will enlighten and it will guide, but foolishness is bound to trial and error. All we can do is try and see where it goes, see how it's going to work. And oftentimes the mistaken choices bring us to calamity. But wisdom helps us to be much more reflective and insightful. We think about the odds. What are the chances of this working? What pieces of knowledge do we have that we can apply to help us come to a sensible conclusion to the matter? So Solomon said, between the two, the individual who seeks after wisdom and knowledge is going to have a much better life. He's going to far excel, as opposed to the individual who is simply bound up in his own foolishness. He is more concerned about having a good time than ever accomplishing anything in life, and his life is simply bound up in trial and error, mostly error, painfully so, time and time again. In question 4, he asks, what disadvantages attend wisdom? Wisdom and knowledge is not an easy course to follow. Up in verse 13 of chapter 1, remember what he said, that I gave my heart to seek and search out by wisdom concerning all things that are done under the sun. This, and he calls it sore travail, hath God given to the sons of man to be exercised thereby. To those of us that have had some pursuit of education, maybe higher education, we've delved more deeply into certain topics. The job was not an easy job. It was not an easy journey. It took time. It took effort. It took mental discipline. It took sometimes an extended amount of research to be able to conquer some of the questions and problems that you were striving to find answers to. So the path of wisdom is not the easy road to travel, and to many that's a disadvantage. And of course, we can look at the end result. The greater the wisdom that we get, the more we see those things that we'll never be able to fix. We're more aware of the pain and the injustice that are suffered by others. We see many things that go awry, and we realize our own helplessness. We can't automatically rebuild all the houses destroyed by a hurricane or a tornado. We can't wishfully make a storm of fire go away whenever the wildfires are raging, as in places like California. We can't make those things change. We see the conditions. We have the fear that it's coming. We maybe can give some limited precautions. But here it comes, and the damage is wrought. In chapter 1 and verse 18, he said, for in much wisdom is much grief, and he that increaseth knowledge increases sorrow. You're not just left to, oh, I guess here's coming fire or calamity, and I wonder what's going to happen. We have the knowledge to know what's going to happen. We have the experience to see where these things are going to go. And often our hearts are grieved for the people who lose their homes. They lose maybe the lives of family members and loved ones. We know what the word disaster really means because we've seen it, we've learned about it, we've taken precautions to try to avoid and minimize the damage and the danger, but there is a limit to how much we can do. In question 5, why did Solomon conclude that the quest for wisdom was vanity? Well, he said that there's a limitation here. The wisdom all by itself, the knowledge that we accumulate and the use of that knowledge and wisdom can only take us so far. And the difficult journey to attain that wisdom is going to produce grief as we learn more about the problems that in essence cannot be fixed in this world. And so as a result of this, we understand that there is a dark side. Sin is here. There are going to be consequences of sin. There are going to be hardships and problems and injustice. These issues are going to be here as long as the world stands, and we're not going to be able to pass enough laws to legislate morality and to legislate fair treatment of others and to fix all the problems that are here. Many things originate in the hearts of men, and to those who are bound up in wisdom and folly, they don't care who they hurt. Wisdom doesn't appeal to them, And if they destroy others, the property of others or whatever, so be it. Because to them it all has an end result that somehow is going to benefit them or make a statement for them, and they just don't care. And so with that reality, wisdom helps us to just kind of grieve and shake our heads because we see where certain paths are going to go. But the other end of it that Solomon outlines for us is here in chapter 2 and verses 15 and 16. He said, okay, you have the diligent student who is wise, maybe beyond his years, we might say. He has tremendous wisdom and knowledge and insight. He can make good predictions. He can make wise choices in his life. And in many respects, he spares himself from many sorrows by making the wise choices that he's been enabled to do. And then you have the foolish person who is doing all kinds of horrible things to others. He also is living a reckless lifestyle that maybe is very destructive for himself. He is caught up in his madness and folly. But you know what? Both of these people one day have something very much in common. They are going to die. Wisdom will not give you infinite life, and neither will folly. Our days here are numbered. In the second chapter of Ecclesiastes, verses 15 and 16, Solomon said, Then said I in my heart, As it happeneth to the fool, so it happeneth even to me. And why was I then more wise? Then I said in my heart, This is also vanity. For there is no remembrance of the wise man than of the fool forever. Seeing that which now is, in the days to come, shall all be forgotten. And how dieth the wise man? As the fool. We come to the end of our days, whether we were wise and virtuous, or foolish and filled with folly. One day, if the Lord lingers, we will be laid to rest, our bodies will be dead, and our spirit will go back to the God that gave it. And then in succeeding generations, maybe those landmark things that we did, the accomplishments, all of the things that were success points in our existence, they'll be forgotten. Several generations down the road, folks won't remember our names. They will not remember the work that we did. They will not remember the efforts that we put forth. So Solomon said, in that respect, both wisdom and folly bring you to naught. It's all vanity and vexation of spirit. In question 6, if one were making a quest for wisdom today, what might he be doing? Well, as we mentioned, the individual who is truly on a quest for knowledge and learning can become that professional student that is so busy that he takes advantage of every opportunity to indulge in things that increase his learning. But then as well, he may deny himself the opportunity to do anything that is pleasurable and to be desired. He cheats himself out of some of the good times of life because we look at what's going on and we just get too busy for it. The quest for wisdom may hinder one's spirituality as well. We can be so busy learning in secular terms, learning professional items, being involved in what makes us successful in the affairs of this world, that we forget about God. And we squeeze God out of our schedule. Basically what you see happening here is that the individual who is on this endless quest for secular knowledge is all concerned about the here and now. What's going on? What can I do to advance myself, to make my life better, to make a mark on society now? And if we are not wise in spiritual affairs, then we let those things get crowded out of the schedule. In Matthew 6:33, we are taught to seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. And so the wise man is going to die, and his success in large measure will be forgotten in generations after his death. But to be wise in spiritual things is of eternal value. It helps us to make better life choices here, and it also helps us to make those choices that can give us heaven whenever this life is over. So Solomon here looks at wisdom versus folly, and notice how he says it as he sums it all up. In verse 16 of Ecclesiastes 2, for there is no remembrance of the wise man more than of the fool forever, seeing that which now is in the days to come shall all be forgotten. And how dieth the wise man? As the fool. Therefore I hated life, because the work that is wrought under the sun is grievous unto me, for all is vanity and vexation of spirit. The point that Solomon's making here is that all of the things that I may look at as enjoyable and the great success marks in my life and all of those things that I do, they all have a limited duration. Life is temporary, and then we die. And so we need to make the best, and Solomon will tell us this as we go through the book. We need to make the best of our days here, and he will give us some clues as to how to do that. But at the same time, the important thing is to realize that this life is transitory. We're only here for a little while. James says we're like a vapor that appears for a little time, and then we vanish away. And we need to prepare for the next level of our existence, rather than simply being focused on the vanity and vexation of spirit that occurs in the here and now. We find in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, in the first 11 verses, Solomon explores a topic that's very near and dear to many people today. And that's the idea that God put me here to have a good time. And I should chase after every pleasurable thing that I want to pursue. And life is about grabbing all of the gusto you can get, because you only go around once and you need to make it fun. Well, yes, life is enjoyable. There are many good features to talk about this life. God intended for us to have a good, abundant life here. But he also helps us to understand you have to remember you're not here forever. And you've got to prepare for that as well. As we look here to the opening of chapter 2 in Ecclesiastes, Solomon said, I said in mine heart, go to now, and I will prove thee with mirth. Therefore enjoy pleasure, and behold, this also is vanity. And the author asks in question 7, how was Solomon qualified to speak on the vanity of pleasure? Well, Solomon was king. He had control of his schedule. He had all the time that a man could want. He had access to all of the resources that money could buy. And he had the opportunity and the authority to indulge himself in anything pleasurable that he desired. Down in verse 10 he says of Ecclesiastes 2, and whatsoever mine eyes desired I kept not from them. I withheld not my heart from any joy, for my heart rejoiced in all of my labor, and this was my portion of all of my labor. Let me tell you what I found. He said, I could do everything that I wanted to do. There was no joy that was withheld from me, because I had the wherewithal and the opportunity to try it all. But was it satisfying? Did that make him say that my life was wonderful because I just had a life filled with fun? Let's continue studying. In question 8, he said, name the things which Solomon did to satisfy his desire for pleasure. Well, let's look at verse 2. I said of laughter, it is mad, and of mirth, what doeth it? In other words, he gave himself over to fun, to laughter, to comedy, to those lighter moments. Maybe looking after all of those things that bring a chuckle, all of those things that will bring a big belly laugh, those things that are looked at as fun, the joking around, the lightheartedness. He gave himself to all of that mirth. But what did he say about it? Well, let's continue reading and we'll see. We find in chapter 2 and verse 3, I sought in mine heart to give myself unto wine. So I'm going to drink it up. A lot of people seem to have a good time whenever they are drinking, and so I'm going to enjoy that as well. He said, yet acquainting mine heart with wisdom, and to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was that good for the sons of men, which they should do under the heaven all the days of their lives. He said, so I looked at everything. I laughed, I drank and was merry. I laughed about the idea of wisdom and folly. I simply, in essence, said I didn't care. But let's see where he went with that. Continuing in verse 4, he said, I made me great works. I builded me houses. I planted me vineyards. I made me gardens and orchards. I planted trees in them of all kinds of fruits. I made me pools of water, to water therewith the wood that bringeth forth trees. I got me servants and maidens, and had servants born in mine house. I also had great possessions of great and small cattle, above all that were in Jerusalem before me. I gathered me also silver and gold, and the peculiar treasure of kings and of the provinces. I gat me men singers and women singers, and the delights of the sons of men, as musical instruments, and that of all sorts. Now notice what all he says here. In verses 4 through 8, he said, I got busy with construction projects. I built monuments. I built palaces. I built great houses to dwell in. I built buildings that were the envy of the world. We think about the temple that he built, and what a wonderful, elaborate structure that was. Solomon gave himself to all of those things and could walk around saying, look what I've done. These gardens are beautiful. I've got all kinds of exotic trees. I have all kinds of exotic plants. I have everything here that is beautiful to the eye. Everything from the arts I have delved into. He said that he had men singers and women singers. He said, I love music. And so I filled the house, so to speak, with music. I had all kinds of performers. I was entertained by all of that. And it brought many enjoyable moments to him, I am sure. But was that fulfillment in and of itself? Was music the end all of life? Was it to be the one thing that he chased after? Well, he went on. He said he also gave himself to the delights of the sons of men. We find that other translations talk about this verse using the idea of many concubines. Solomon enjoyed sex. He indulged himself in all kinds of sexual pleasures, as well as the things that he built, the music that he surrounded himself with, the wine that he drank, having a good old time with laughter. He pursued all of those things. And you know what? As question 9 asks us, it says, which of these things are men pursuing today in their quest for happiness? And it's the same stuff. Individuals are chasing many of these same rainbows, hoping that it's going to give them some degree of satisfaction and fulfillment in life. And I've known so many people who were workaholics, individuals who were advanced in wisdom and studies, individuals who gave themselves over to laughter and to the high side of life with the wine and the song and all of the other pleasures of this life, and yet they still had an empty place in their soul. It did not give them fulfillment. It only was a band-aid for a way to deal with a passing moment of sadness, and maybe he would rise above it for a while, but then some other calamity would come along. This has been the cycle of man historically, that we wanted something to bring us out of our depression. We wanted something to put a smile back on our face. We wanted the enjoyments of this life, but the enjoyments in and of themselves always left us wanting more. There was never a complete sense of satisfaction. In question 10, what satisfaction did Solomon find in these things? Notice what he says in verse 11. Then I looked on all the works that my hands had wrought, and on the labor that I had labored to do, and behold, all was vanity and vexation of spirit, and there was no profit under the sun. These things did not satisfy me. Whenever he got to the end of his days, he could not look back and say, well, I had a good time on that trip. I sure enjoyed myself when I did this or when I did the other. All of those things fade into oblivion whenever you're getting ready to take your last breath. It's not a reflection back on all the good times that I had. It's realizing my life now is about to end, and what preparations have I made for that. So in this pure chasing after pleasure, Solomon found that it was vanity and vexation of spirit. It was just like chasing the wind. In question 11, why did he conclude that the quest for pleasure ends in vanity? Well, as we mentioned, he tried it all, but it was without any lasting satisfaction. You enjoy this, you enjoy that, and shortly thereafter, you're seeking something else because you are still not satisfied. And then in question 12, do those who seek pleasure today find the contentment? Is that all there is to life? That we're just here to have a hoop and holler and good time, and that's all there is to our existence? No. Individuals do not find a satisfaction in that. It has its brief moments of pleasure. It gives us a smile. It gives us a sense of temporary satisfaction. But the chase never ends. Whatever pleasurable thing we've done, now we're looking for the next thing that we can invent to do. What's going to be the next trip? What's going to be the next project? What's going to be the next thing that we do to fill our time here under the sun? So Solomon here has helped us to understand that the endless search for wisdom, that's not where it's at. Living a life of careless, foolish folly, that's not going to bring us satisfaction. And then chasing pleasure endlessly, only doing those things to fill the time with no redeeming value to it, all of those are vanity and vexation of spirit. But they are the roads that so many people are chasing down today. They're following the very same paths, thinking that these things are somehow why they were put here. And Solomon will tell us at the end of this book that that's not our purpose. We were not here just to get smart. We were not put here just to indulge ourselves in all sorts of pleasurable activities. And neither were we put here to be foolish, ridiculous, and filled with folly. There's another reason why we are here. And we'll notice that further as we can continue our studies next time in the book of Ecclesiastes. And we hope that you'll join us then.